So hello, this is panel 7 again. Panel 7 is on policies for a green recovery of the building sector. My name is Veit Bürger. I work as a researcher at the Öko-Institut, which is located in the southwestern corner of Germany in Freiburg, which is an independent environmental research institute. And this panel normally would be also co-hosted by Jan Rosenow, working for the Regulatory Assistant Projects. Many of you might know him. Unfortunately, Jan can't join us today for some family reasons, and he's very sorry about that, and he sends his warmest regards to all of you. But this time, it's only me here as moderator. We have had already a super exciting presentations during the last days and also during this morning in this panel. Very exciting discussions over the last 2 days. And I think we simply continue in the same manner as we've done that in the previous slots. So this slot in the afternoon or over noon is on delivery models, mainly concepts, services, tools to support homeowners in finding the right strategy, in finding financing, with regard to the refurbishment of their buildings. And we have again 3 very interesting and very exciting presentations. One technical issue in the beginning: if you have any questions to the panelists, if you have questions to the different presentations, please submit them in the questions and answer section at the Woover app. I think you are quite familiar with that. In the meantime, I will collect them and then I will put them forward to the panelists. So we start right away with the first presentation, which is a joint presentation, which is given by Christophe Millin and Adrien Bullier. Both work for the CEEE, which is so for the European Commission. CEEE stands for Climate, Infrastructure and Environment Executive Agency. And Christophe and Adrien, they talk about towards large-scale rollout of integrated home renovation services in Europe.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Adrien Bullier, and together with my colleague Christophe Millin, we're going to present you a snapshot of the paper we wrote, which is about the large-scale rollout of integrated home renovation services, which consists basically of a review and an analysis of different local initiatives which have been funded through the Horizon 2020 Energy Efficiency Programme. So the starting point for this paper is the fact that we have high ambitions for the building stock in Europe. Climate neutrality by 2050 means that we need to double renovation rates, and we need to increase significantly the level of savings that we achieve every time we renovate a home. Now, the question we want to ask is it realistic to expect that suddenly homeowners are going to start renovating their home twice as much and way more effectively than they are currently? And so the reverse question we want to tackle with this paper is why people do not renovate their home, because what we're seeing currently is mostly people are choosing not to renovate their home.
There is already a large literature on the reasons why homeowners do not renovate their home, with a lot of focus on the lack of information and a lot of focus also on the lack of profitability for energy efficiency investment. Here, the assumption is that maybe people do not renovate their home because it's just too complicated and too cumbersome to go through the full process. So in the paper, we define a number of steps in what we call the customer journey for home renovation, from initial contact and information to quality assurance and ex-post monitoring. And we try to place the current market offer in front of these different steps and qualify these this market offer. It looks very nice like this. In reality, it rather looks like this, with the homeowners having to contact very different stakeholders that are not coordinated and going through a very windy journey for home renovation. So the idea is that to make to allow uptake of home renovation, we have to take on some of the tasks for which homeowners are not well equipped. At the moment, the customer journey is no one's business, and so we have to define new types of integrated services where integrated has a twofold meaning. It means well integrated, combining a different set of services in a package offer, but also very well integrated in its environment, making best use of what is locally available in terms of local skills, local professional, and also local support schemes.
So when we look at different experiences across Europe, we've basically come up with 3 models that represent ways that integrated home renovation services can be implemented in different local contexts. So they're called advice, support, and implementation. And as you can see here, they're each covering different parts of the customer journey. There are overlaps, but mainly they have different positioning, and this is what I'm going to try to explain here. The first model is the advice model, and as you can see here, it's covering mostly the upstream part of the customer journey. And here there's a strong focus on information campaigns, trying to detect the homeowner at the right moment, for example, when they're purchasing a home or when they're looking for information because they're already motivated to renovate their home, helping them to do a simplified diagnosis. But here you just general recommendations without getting into the design. Helping them to structure, already identify the financing possibilities, how much they could borrow, how much public grants they could access. And in some cases, you also have a list of pre-qualified companies that homeowners can call. But the integrated home renovation services here will not get involved into defining the renovation measures and selecting the companies and helping them to select companies. The tipping point with the second model, which we call the support model, is basically that in the advice model, you don't take a position, you don't take any responsibility for what happens to the homeowner. In a support model, the home renovation service takes responsibility. They take position in the project design by identifying what needs to be done. And in some cases, it's basically an extended architect's mandate that they have. So doing the full design, helping homeowners to select companies when there are several companies to be selected from. And structuring the financing plan. And then once the works are being implemented, supervising the works and ensuring that they are well implemented, including after the works. The difference with the third model here is that in the support model, basically you're helping the homeowner to work with companies. In the implementation model, you're basically also implementing the works directly. And here it's very much of a turnkey contract where you have design and works included. That really helps you to guarantee that the result will be what is expected. So in terms of the energy savings, but also the quality of the works in general. So this is where you will find energy performance contracting, but not only. Now, these two models are conflicting in a way. You can do one, but you cannot do the other, in the sense that if you're helping the homeowner at some point, you can't be working in the implementation of the works because you have conflicting interests. The last point that we want to present in the models is the position of finance. The way that we see it, finance is not an integral part of each of these models. It is more of an option that can be plugged in, mostly on the support and implementation models. Now, finance is not the solution for home renovation, but it has to be part of the picture if we want to bring a fully integrated service to the homeowners. So there are different ways. Some of the integrated home renovation services provide a standalone offer. Now, that requires appropriate legal framework, which has been seen, for example, in France. But in other cases, there's other financing services that can be developed. So it's support in accessing public grants. It's pre-financing of public grants, because the grants usually come much later on. And then in many cases, you'll have a partnership with a retail bank where the home renovation service will already help simplify the procedure to get access to the loan and to underwrite the loan for the bank.
We hope that with this brief presentation, you will be eager to look more into the details of the models we've outlined in the paper. In the paper, you will also find as the exact references of projects we use to support the argument. What we wanted to emphasize with this paper is that different models hardly fit in one and the same structure. So choices have to be made if you want to develop your own offer. Either you will operate on the margin of the market, providing information first level advice, or you will operate fully on the market. Either you provide only intellectual work support to homeowners, or you also provide work, and in that case you have an economic incentive in interest in providing this work. So the positioning differ. Either you have or you don't an autonomous financial offer. So choices have to be made, and these choices needs to be balanced with the cost for defining and implementing and operating the services. You have to balance this with investment potential in the territory that where you will operate. And particularly when we discuss low energy refurbishment, there is not such a long track record of successful low energy refurbishment. So you have also, especially for the initiatives that are supported by public actor, to think of where to place your action to build homeowners' trust, which is particularly important. The question is not so much who finally deliver the services. In most cases, it will be private actor commissioned by the integrated services, but who is responsible to homeowners for the work. The best solution is a compromise, always based on local conditions. So we don't take position on what is best. You have to define this in context. Another question that we raised in the paper is whether or not these integrated home renovation services should be economically viable. From the initiatives we've been supporting or following in the past, we estimate that it takes 4 to 6 years to reach maturity. But even for the initiatives that are mature now, none of them has reached self-sustainability. But if we consider the amount of investment that is triggered per euro received in public support, we can say it's a very effective use of public funds. And in a context where there will be massive injections of public support to trigger home renovation, we can legitimately consider that this part of this support should go to this type of integrated home renovation services. And maybe we shouldn't demand that these are self-sustainable in the short term and even in the medium term. However, if we consider that some of them are carrying on market activities, which is what we've said before. And also, if we consider that public support is received to carry these market activities, then special attention should be paid to the legal and regulatory frameworks to facilitate the large-scale deployment and avoid difficulties. So we discuss a number of these points also in the paper. To conclude, we consider that integrated home energy services are essential to move towards our climate goals and reach climate neutrality by 2050. They are particularly key in triggering low energy renovation. We have only scratched the surface in this paper of what this could mean concretely. We hope that this paper contributed to clarify the concept and bring some elements of definition and understanding on what this type of services could mean. But the initiatives from the front runner must be further harvested. The findings should be analyzed and debated. So we should continue this discussion. We consider that public funds to support this initiative are particularly justified, considering first that there is a need for this type of services, and also considering the amount of investment that could be triggered through this initiative. So from our side, from the Commission, we will continue supporting these integrated home innovation services in different ways. But more local and national schemes could also be considered. Some technical assistance schemes, for example, could be developed to support the multiplication of initiatives. One point we haven't discussed here is capacity of local actors to develop and operate such schemes that should be reinforced, develop new skills and even new profession for this type of integrated services. So I hope next time we will have the opportunity to meet in the Mediterranean and to discuss this directly. For the time being, I'm afraid you only have the picture here, but I think still you have the possibility to ask a few questions through the platform, and also you have our contact information in case you want to get in touch and continue this discussion. Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you very much to both of you for this very good presentation and this very good view or input to the integrated home renovation services and the different models that are out there on the market. There are a couple of questions from our audience, from our participants. The first one is about the regional scale of the regional scope of the services. Do you have a view about the scale of services? Does it matter if they are local, citywide, regional? Bearing in mind most construction business are SMEs, is this a limitation?
Yeah, maybe I'll take the first the answer to this first question. What we explain a bit in the paper in the last part is very much focused on what are the strategic choices you need to make, and clearly the territorial scope will depend also on a number of other factors. For example, if you're aiming at deep renovation, the economic scale of creating a renovation service will depend on the amount of investments that you make for each home renovation project. So if you're looking at multi-family buildings, it's not the same as detached houses. And it's not the same if you're looking at changing boilers and if you're looking at deep renovation. So overall, what we see is that the services that target deep renovation tend to go more on a regional scale because you have less projects, at least at the start. The potential number of people interested to do deep renovation is lower, so you need to be bigger. But that also gives you a bigger potential for future development. The ones, and that's also the ones who do more services, so the support models and the implementation models tend to be on a bigger scale. The models that do more advice You can see them on a more local basis. So usually it's a mid-size city.
Okay. Thank you. There are a couple of other questions. The next one is, have you validated the different types of integrated renovation services models you have presented with the existing operating services of this kind in Europe? To which extent your findings are aligned or go one step further from those of previous projects, such as the Horizon 2020 Innovate project?
I can answer this one. Yes, indeed, these typologies and findings are based on an observation of the project we've been supporting over the past years with Horizon 2020. And so these are you will find actually the details of along the customer journey of these different examples we take to support the argument. Then the typology we've presented is somehow different from the one drafted in Innovate. I mean, we can find lots of similarities, and it's not exactly, it's not fully different, but we just emphasize a lot in this typology on the tipping points between advice and support, and between support and implementation. And also the place of financing for us is rather more of an option to be put on top of these different models rather than a standalone different model. So there are differences with the typology of Innovate, but obviously a lot of similarities too.
Okay. Next question. Do you see a scale up in schemes in place for some years now? Did they achieve or even exceed their target in terms of number of dwellings renovated? So, or do they struggle? And here's the example of the Dutch Energiesprong, which expected much higher numbers to achieve, which they didn't achieve so far. So it's about the relationship between the initial expectation such models can deliver and the reality.
Yeah, I mean, we emphasize on in the paper on the idea that these integrated services should be not only providing a package of solution, but also be very well integrated in their environment, and they are not a single solution. So obviously, they need to be also supported by a number of actions to improve the skills of the workforce, or a number of actions maybe to have access also to long-term low interest financing, which are partly out of the scope of what integrated home renovation services can do, and so I think we think that, and based on the observation we've made, that these approaches are quite successful in triggering investment, but in terms of scale, we are still dealing with pilot, also because once the pilot is established and when the services are proven interesting, then we can consider scaling up. We discuss in the paper the idea that these services should be subsidized, and maybe subsidized for quite a long term. So they do not necessarily need to be economically viable. They could be actually a very good use of public funds in the frame of the recovery plans and in the frame of the Green Deal. So they could be also targeted with a fund that will arrive. But indeed, we're still piloting, and we still need to scale up. Hence the title of the paper.
Okay, thank you. And maybe we take a final question before we move on. It's about the relationship between the state level and the governmental level of the federal government and the local level where these services are provided. So should member states create programs for public support to a network of local advice and support schemes covering the whole country, with a national technical coordination and support and the national online advice site directly to customers?
Yeah, I mean, maybe I'll start, and Chris, if you can complement. But I mean, I think there's no good answer to this question. It's really, you need to get people on board on this idea. I think ultimately, I mean, depending on what member state we're talking about, because a small member state is sometimes smaller than a big region in a big country. But so the regional scale tends to make a lot of sense. Whether you want to coordinate that at the national level can make sense or not, depending how it's done. So I don't think there's a clear-cut answer on that. What is for sure is there's probably no one-size-fits-all. There's a number of good, recipes that we've tried to identify. Having a national network basically says, well, we're putting people together and they need to come up with answers that are adapted to the regional level or to the local level. That I think makes sense, but it might be different. The typology of buildings, the typology of companies that you're working with might also differ a lot. In France, some areas have no general contractors. Some have, so that makes a big difference, for example.
And maybe that bridges also with the next presentation. I think that there are a number of activities that in any case are out of market activities, and there needs to be some sort of complementarity with the different initiative. Maybe some part of the services could be provided as part of a service of general interest. And I think this is what Françoise is going to discuss and present. So we'll be happy to come back to this also in the last discussion.
Okay, perfect. So, but we will have to wait for the third presentation for the input of Françoise. So thanks to both of you for the moment now. And we might come, because there are still some open questions, but we need to move forward. But we might come back to these questions in the final debate. So thanks, Adrien. Thanks, Christoph. So we move forward now to the next presentation, which is provided by Judith Spillemakers. Judith is project officer at the Flemish Energy and Climate Agency, and Judith is providing an introduction into the Flemish Building Renovation Passport. Judith, you have the floor.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining my presentation on the Flemish Building Renovation Passport, Moving Forward Together. My name is Judith Spillemakers, and I'm working for the Flemish Energy and Climate Agency for the Be Real project. Be Real is a live integrated project focusing on the acceleration of local and regional renovation strategies for residential dwellings. We have 9 beneficial partners for the Be Real project. 2 are regional authorities. It's the Flemish Energy and Climate Agency and the Wallonian Department for Spatial Planning, Housing, Heritage and Energy. Also 3 Flemish cities join. It's Ghent, Antwerp and Mechelen. 2 Wallonian cities, Moucron and La Louvière, and 2 knowledge centers, the Belgian Building Research Institute and the Knowledge Center for Flemish Cities. Together, we have a budget of 14 million euros, 60% of which comes from the EU to undertake various actions over 7 years. Important for our projects are the demonstration and pilot projects of the cities. At the same time, policy instruments are being developed, like the Building Renovation Passport, and improved thanks to the practical experience of the city projects. Also, capacity building is carried out, and from all these actions, a series of best practices and lessons learned are gathered, which we scale up by dissemination to other cities or municipalities in Belgium, but of course also to other European countries or even beyond, like in this case by giving the presentation for you at this very great European event. I have 2 main objectives for this presentation. First, I would like to explain to you how we have developed the concept of the Building Renovation Passport in Flanders by giving you a clear overview of our product Woning Pass. And secondly, I would like to give you an insight into the development process and some lessons learned. Now, before I start my presentation, I would like to show you as an introduction a 1-minute video. It's subtitled in English.
Wil je een eigen woning bouwen, verbouwen, kopen of verkopen? Proficiat. Daar komt momenteel nog heel wat papierwerk bij kijken. Je hebt een energieprestatiecertificaat nodig of een EPB-aangifte, een bodemattest, een elektriciteitskeuring, een waterkeuring, een keuring van een verwarmingsketel. Maar wat als je een overzicht zou krijgen van al die attesten en certificaten in één handig, digitaal en persoonlijk paspoort? Even je e-ID in de lezer stoppen en de nieuwe woningpas toont je automatisch in één oogopslag een aantal specifieke kenmerken van jouw woning in een handig overzicht. Je hoeft je woningpas trouwens niet aan te vragen. Deze wordt automatisch opgemaakt. In jouw woningpas zie je welke attesten en certificaten je nodig hebt bij het verkopen of verbouwen van jouw woning. Bovendien vind je in jouw woningpas een overzicht terug van verschillende kenmerken van jouw woning, zoals de EPB-aangifte of je energiescore uit het energieprestatiecertificaat in een nieuw label. Je kan jouw score ook vergelijken met andere woningen in jouw gemeente of provincie. En het wordt nog beter, want jouw woningpas zal in de toekomst steeds meer attesten en informatie bevatten. In de komende jaren zal je zelfs attesten met anderen kunnen delen of hen toegang geven tot jouw woningpas. Handig voor jouw bouwpartners, toekomstige kopers of huurders, jouw notaris of makelaar. Alles wat je wil weten over jouw woning vind je voortaan op één plek: de woningpas. Meer weten? Kijk op woningpas.vlaanderen.be.
Now let me show you some user interfaces from Woningpas. Let's say you just logged in with your own eID, and you can see several data that is known about your house, located at the address Energiestraat 38 in Zomerbeek. In the dashboard, you can see the status of the energy performance, the insulation, and the installations. This information comes from the EPC and EPB. Below, you can track the energetic renovation works carried out after the creation of the EPC. In this case, an EPC label C was achieved in 2012, and some renovation works were carried out moving towards label A, which is a Flemish goal for 2050. If you click on Energy, you receive the information from the EPC with an explanation of the label score and below the benchmark with other similar dwellings. If you click on Advice, you receive an overview of the steps to be taken to achieve a better energy performance of your dwelling, including costs. This information is the same as the one from the EPC. If you click on Insulation, you receive the more detailed information from the EPC with your score for every building shell, grouped or separately if you want, towards the Flemish goal. Other interesting data or functionalities are the solar map, to calculate the solar potential of your roof in case you would like to invest in installations based on solar energy. Test your EPC tool is to get an indication of your EPC label in case you don't have one. The housing quality check tool is based on a questionnaire. You can get an overview of grants, the possibility to share your data with others, like your renovation advisor, for example, and the possibility to upload data or documents related to renovation works. I hope I was able to give you a clear view on our product Woningpas. And as you can imagine, this has not been built in one single day. So let me give you insight on the development process. The official beginning of the development process came in December 2014, when the Flemish Minister of Energy at that time announced the official start of the Renovation Pact. And the goal of this pact was to develop an action plan to increase the renovation rate of the Flemish building stock and to optimize its energy performance. Important was that 34 different organizations engaged to contribute to this renovation pact. In 2015, the Flemish government validated a concept note, which was signed by 3 different ministers, the Minister of Energy, the Minister of Housing, and the Minister of Environment. And it was also the start of 10 thematic working groups, and they worked all on crucial elements of the strategy. And one of these groups focused on the development of the renovation advice, which has been implemented in today's EPC. And another group focused on the creation of Flanders building renovation passport, the Woningpas. The first stakeholder discussion about the content of the Woningpas was held later that year, and the subject of this meeting was mainly service design. With other words, they talked about how services should be provided in interaction with users, starting from the needs from the users. This resulted in a concept note where the unlimited approach was utilized. That means that all the functions that could be dreamed up during this discussion were kept on the table as future possibilities. In the meantime, a feasibility study was started to check on factors like the availability of data, technology limits, costs, etc. And together with the business analysis, this resulted into the product design note. Now, parallel to this Woningpas development part, the Flemish Spatial Department conducted a multi-sectoral feasibility study in 2015. It had a purpose to maximize the integration and simplification of all kinds of certificates in order to reduce the administrative burden and the costs for builders, renovators, owners, sellers, and the government. And one of the policy proposals was to create a one-page overview of certificates. And this created a great interest in the Woningpas from various policy fields and partners. And this resulted to a partnership between the Flemish Energy and Climate Agency, the Flemish Department of Housing, the Public Waste Agency of Flanders, and the Flemish Department of Environment to develop Woningpas together. This resulted to the launch of the first light release of Woningpas in December 2018, with data on energy and renovation advice, environmental maps, a one-page overview of certificates, and an overview of necessary certificates in case of building, renovating, selling, or renting out. Later, new data and functionality were made available by Woningpas during the last years, so that today we can speak of Woningpas medium version. We can conclude from this that the Woningpas has been through an organic process of co-creation, product design, deployment, and redesign. First, a group of stakeholders worked in a co-creation process to define possibilities. Next, reality was introduced with the attention for several limits, like the availability of data and functions. And finally, partners were gathered to carry the ownership. But during the whole process, the citizen's user experience remained crucial, as he is the most important user of a Woningpas. And not only were they represented by consumer organizations as part of the stakeholders co-creation group, but we also organized citizens' consultations and in-depth interviews to evaluate the prototype. Also, shortly after the launch in 2018, we received user feedback through questionnaires and in-depth user testing. And later this year, we will gather again feedback from the Be Real City partners, testing the tool in real renovation projects. Of course, any of these three steps can each initiate the development process of the building renovation passport. So it is not a linear process that always has to start at the same point and goes in one specific direction in every situation. So you can start at any point in any direction. Vital factors in this process are, of course, the availability of data and the partnerships with the organizations managing this data. But next to that, we experience that in addition, the stakeholders also play a very vital role. They enlarge the impact of the Woningpas, and not only by increasing the support towards the user groups they represent, but also by their holistic approach to stimulate renovations. A second experience is that we will always approach the user interface from the perspective of the citizen's user experience first, before even proceeding to development, just to make sure everything we develop is interesting and understandable enough for its users. And the last lesson learned is the importance of the context. In Flanders, we have our political context, our own laws. We have our own regional long-term renovation strategy. We have our own policy instruments to support this strategy. We have our own language, our own data sources managed by different departments, each organized in a very specific way. So, yeah, Woningpas has been developed for Flanders, and unfortunately, it cannot easily be reused in other situations or locations. Nevertheless, we are happy to have shared our experience. It was certainly a path of moving forward together, as you will hopefully have noticed from this presentation, and I hope our experience help other countries or regions to create their own building renovation passport. So I thank you very much for your attention, and if there are any further questions, please feel free to ask.
Judith, thank you very much for your presentation and for your introduction in this very interesting concept and bundle of information which is put together in this Woningpas. To be honest, when I read your paper, I was really wondering about the huge amount of different information which is put together, and that brought me directly to the question, taking the climate policy perspective, isn't there a danger that too much information will divert attention from the essentials, which are the recommendations towards refurbishing the building?
Yes, I've seen your your question coming in my paper, Veet. But yes, indeed, by the holistic view, by putting all aspects of the building together, there is a kind of diversion. I agree very much. But on the other hand, we all know that renovating or even pushing people for energetic renovation is not simply to get them the energetic information. Sometimes if you look at the customer journey, and I think we've seen that in the previous presentation from Adrian and Christophe, that there is a customer journey, and it starts by giving people information, by getting them conscious about what can happen, what is the, for example, what is the goal in Flanders, and by putting all information together that is specifically for a building, then new buyers, they can access their Woningpas, for example, because of they are interested in a soil certificate, for example, and then they look at other aspects. So I think there is a yes and a no. There is a a pro and a con on the holistic view, I think. And if you see at the history of how it's developed, I think it was a decision of a political, certain political decision to bring three ministers together from environment, from energy, from housing, and they wanted also a one-page certificate information, and I think that is actually the start of the holistic view.
Thank you. now the questions pop up here, so we have to speed up.
Go ahead.
So the Woningpas can be created without an EPC, right?
Yes.
Are there other ways to include energy information, and how are numbers of Woningpas growing? How many % in total or per year?
Okay, yeah. First question, all owners have access to their Woningpas, except for apartments, because there is still an issue on the addressing subject. So perhaps not every owner has access to his Woningpas. But of course, you can only have access to your EPC results if there is an EPC available. So if there is not an EPC available, then people have that test your EPC tool. It was implemented last year, and it is a kind of a quick scan. It's a questionnaire of 10 questions, I think, and then you can have an indication of your EPC and also have some recommendations. So that is that tries to motivate people to get an EPC, or to just to make sure that they get very specific information, but perhaps it is already motivating enough to take some measures. And then your second question, I forgot.
The number.
The number, yes.
Yeah, the number.
I've got a slide over that, because I did not know the numbers from heart, so I'm going to try to share my screen if possible. I'm not sure if you can see it. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, that's the current use of the warning pass. It's not that overwhelming, because we did not do much of a communication campaigns, because in the beginning it was very light, the information that was in the warning pass. So we were a little bit afraid perhaps to burn the application by giving a bad first impression. But now I think, since the medium version is there, and since you also can share your warning pass with other people, and I think we see here a slide in the graph, a slide use such growth since December 2020. So it's 12,000 views per month for the non-unique users, and 7,000 for the unique users. Is that a question to your answer to your question?
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. And two questions which I would like to put together before we move forward. The one is, you explained that it's a very specific approach for the Flemish region, for Flanders.
Yes.
So
yes.
And you emphasized the issue that it's not so easy to transfer this concept one-to-one to another country, region, whatever. The question is, how quickly do you think another country could develop at least a similar approach? So it's about the timeline. And the other question is, imagine you get a new government in your country. So what about the risk of changes to the original concept by changing political color, for instance, in the government?
Let me tackle your first question first. Yeah, you can build a warning pass. It depends on the data that is organized in the databases. Also, the kind of way that you access the data. For example, we have chosen to build a layer, and when a user connects to the warning pass and he logged in, then at that time a link to all the databases was made. So the databases are in fact still with the managers of the databases. So it's not that we created one big database with all the data coming in. No, so we also testing warning pass was very difficult, because only the EID the user compiles his own data in the warning pass. Whether it is difficult for other countries, it all depends on how data is structured and on what way you will access. I think you can very quickly make an application that is only connected to one database, but the more databases and the more web services you would like to access, the complicated, and the more partners. I think, it's. I cannot answer how much it will cost for another country, but I think it depends on functionalities and data. And your second question,
about the robustness of the whole concept, depending on the political situation in the country. So
I think since the user gets his information from the databases and web services are still in place, and since it is very distributed, I think when there is a restructuring, except for when databases really come together, but then again, I think it's quite robust. I think because we're all governmental data, And that is, I think, that is the strength of Woning Pass, because it's from the data is from the government, and of course the owner can put his own data in it, but it's still very it's still on one place, and nobody owns that data that the citizens gives in himself. He stays the owner. So I think it's quite robust. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. There's another open question about a rollout strategy, but which I would like to put forward to the end of the discussion, because that's a question I think which is relevant for most of the concepts which we discuss in this section. Judith, thank you very much.
You're welcome. Thank you
for this, and we will talk to each other in the end again. Okay, and now we move forward to the third presentation in our panel here, which is provided by Françoise Refabert. Françoise works as a co-director at Énergie Demain, as far as now located in Paris. And Françoise will talk about the question how to boost one-stop shops for integrated home energy renovation in the European Union. Françoise, the floor is yours.
How to boost one-stop shops for integrated home energy renovations in the EU. I have the honor to present you proposals stemming from two projects funded by the Horizon 2020 program. First is Innovate, started in 2018. It gave me the opportunity to exchange experience among 11 one-stop shops projects across the EU and to reflect on their economic model, namely with Krishna Mahapatra and Brijesh Mainali, who are professor and associate senior lecturer at the Linnaeus University in Växjö, Sweden. They are both co-authors of the paper we submitted to the eceee. And OFE, started in 2020, stands for Originating Retrofit Financing for Energy Efficiency. It's about building a resource center to strengthen the third-party financing companies established in France. My name is Françoise Refabert. I am co-heading Énergie Demain, which is a consulting firm based in Paris and specialized in energy and climate policies. Énergie Demain is coordinating the OFE project. How to define the one-stop shops which are mentioned in the Energy Performance of Building Directive. They are outlined as accessible and transparent advisory tools and assistance instruments. They are a service offer process and to act as a single point of contact and make this whole process straightforward for the end users. It means taking charge of pre-renovation inspection and energy audit, design of the energy renovation, working on the financing plan, easing access to the financing sources, subsidies and loans, coordinating the works, making quality checks and monitoring the energy consumption. All this with a focus on energy savings, which is a characteristic of the one-stop shops compared with other market players. But this is far from being standardized, and we see that the one-stop shops actually do not, most of them, provide this full range of service. Actually, in the Innovate project, we distinguished 4 different models for one-stop shops. The facilitation model is based on first-level advice and raising awareness. The coordination model works like a marketplace between customers and professionals, auditors, installers. The all-inclusive model provides the full range of the service and is responsible for the compliance of the renovation. And finally, the ESCO type model, in addition, is paid through the energy savings. Well, actually, this fourth model is more theoretical in the housing sector. it's more focused on the tertiary sector. One-stop shops rely on public support. At present, these one-stop shop initiatives exist because they are supported by public authorities and or European funds, and their business model appears to be not to be sustainable yet, because their activity implies to spend time on energy performance, which is not the primary concern of households, so it means lots of convincing efforts. It also means to steer lots of small projects and spend time on each of them, and also to make up for the low willingness of households to pay for advice, which means that not all of the service cost can be charged to them. Of course, there is room for improvement and increase the efficiency of one-stop shops, but from the local authority standpoint, I think it's important to emphasize that supporting the implementation of a one-stop shop is not a one-off project. It needs a more stable support. We therefore make proposals for a supportive framework for energy renovation one-stop shops. The EU framework regarding competition law defines the services of general interest, and there is a dividing line between economic and non-economic activities. Applied to the one-stop shops, we have on one side the facilitation and coordination models, which are social services of general interest, and on the other side, the one-stop shop following the all-inclusive model, which are services of general economic interest. For instance, in France, the dividing line between the two categories has not been so easy to define, and it is still a subject, well, this subject is still being discussed. Because the all-inclusive model is so different from the two other ones, the facilitation and coordination ones, from now on, I will not use anymore the one-stop shop term to design the all-inclusive model, but rather the term of integrated home renovation services. And the framework of the services of general interest provides to them an interesting concept, which is the public service obligations. It means that if you define the activity of integrated home renovation services with reference to a public service obligation, then there is a justification for the injection of public funds, for instance, through contracts of public service delegation. And basically, you can adapt the definition of the service obligation according to criteria which may be established at the national level, which provides more legal certainty, and you can also adapt it to local priorities. Easing the financing of the renovations is the second element we wanted to focus on. Actually, the bank's credit offering is not different for home renovations compared to any other projects of the homeowners, although this specific kind of project provide them with energy savings and can bring value to their house or to their dwelling. That being said, the banks are not distinguishing energy renovations from other projects, but they have a growing interest in directing their financings towards sustainable investment. For home loans and renovation loans, it means that the integrated home renovation services can fulfill this demand from the banking industry by ensuring that the renovation measures are appropriate and properly implemented for each building. So I would like to elaborate a little about on the experience of the third-party financing companies in France, which are typical integrated home renovation services. This concept has been defined by law in 2013 and then further specified in 2015. And therefore, the legal definition of société de tiers financement is to include a technical assistance for energy renovation works with a financing offer. This financing offer can be through banks or it can be direct, provided that the third-party financing companies are controlled by local authorities. And the third-party financing companies provide loans which are really fit to the project of the renovation. First, they provide very long-term credit, up to 25 years. This is thanks to the EIB, the European Investment Bank, which has awarded them a long-term credit line. And second, they take into consideration the energy savings when they assess the capability of the homeowner to repay the loan. And so it means that the experience of third-party financing companies in France, which is gathered in the framework of the Orphée project, is going to be a source of information and data on the credit risk which is associated with the financing integrated in this renovation offer. And regarding the financing of renovations, I would like to end this presentation not with a conclusion, but rather a proposal to follow a project we are working on together with the CIRED, which is Centre International de Recherche sur l'Environnement et le Développement, and which is financed by ADEME. It is about linking the integrated home renovation services with a monetary stimulus which would be focused on low carbon assets. It means that investments such as energy efficient renovations could be rewarded with low carbon, low energy financial assets, which could be used to finance a part of this investment. And in France, for instance, we see that using the carbon value, which is recommended by an independent commission to value the state investments decided by the government, these low carbon, low energy financial assets could bring in 5 times more resources than the existing energy efficiency obligation scheme, which is called the Certificat d'économie d'énergie. So it would make it, of course, a much more incentive. And in addition, it is not a weight on the price of energy. So we are very confident that this kind of ideas could ease the financing of renovations. I thank you for your attention, and if you want to follow up this subject, I propose that we keep in touch. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Françoise, for this interesting presentation and for this interesting introduction in your work on one-stop shops. There is no question from the audience, but I have a question. So it's about the the financing role of the state in general. Often you hear that these kind of, and that's not only relevant for one-stop shops, all other integrated services, that companies that provide such services should strive for being economically independent in the long term, at least. And in the first presentation we heard, it takes about 5 to 6 years until such services can operate in an economic way in the market. My question is, where do you see the role of the state? Do you see any long-term role of the state, for instance, in supporting such services financially?
Well, thank you, Wade, for this question. Actually, I would insist on the fact that the responsibility of the state and all authorities, public authorities, should be to put together a consistent framework. And actually, if, for instance, in France, we had a policy and incentives which would be directed to energy efficient renovations, instead of being, scattered over one of single measure of refurbishments, then I think that the market would shift towards this kind of renovation more easily. And so this is just to point out that actually what makes public support necessary to sustain the business model of one-stop shops at the moment is that they specifically focus on a market on market discrepancies. And so by definition, there is no sufficient resource to support them. But if the market shifts towards this, and it depends on mainly public policies, then it could be contemplated to have sustainable business models and no more need for public subsidies.
Thank you. Now we got a couple of questions from the audience. The first one is, do you have any data on whether there is an increase in end user trust and so consequent action taken due to the use of one-stop shops?
Well, I'm afraid I have no data to sustain my answer at the level of all Europe. I must confess. But what I see is that generally speaking, and it was the output of Innovate, for instance, is that when one-stop shops are associated to local authorities, they indeed are credited with a high level of trust. And here again, it depends on the way the market is, regulated. And to come back to my country, France, what I see is a counterexample. There has been a campaign favoring the fact that people change their boiler with heavy incentives put thanks to the scheme I mentioned, the energy certificates. And so people were able to change their boiler for €1. Of course, plenty of unscrupulous offers raised thanks to that. And generally speaking, we can see that it made the market get into a lot of confusion instead of the result which was expected.
Okay, thank you. There are two additional questions. The first one is, as payback periods are long, it is indeed important to reward energy savings as such by instruments like energy efficiency obligation schemes. What is the experience in France with this tool? What is the downside?
Well, I just mentioned one downside. So basically, I would answer that it depends on the way it is designed. And right now, I'm happy to see that there is a shift in France towards the idea that this instrument should be oriented more on energy efficient projects, renovations, and on top of that, that more money should be put on controls and things like that. So I think that, you know, we cannot provide an answer which is based on, you know, this instrument is good and this instrument is bad. It's really a matter of implementation and being cautious about unexpected negative effects.
Okay. So thank you. And then there's a question to your slide a step further. Would this scheme which you propose in this slide be aligned with the EU taxonomy criteria?
Yes, I think so. But at the same time, well, what I see in the taxonomy regarding energy renovations is that basically it is based on following the national standards. So I think that in some countries, and for instance in France, if you stay with this level of safeguard, then it's not enough to be effective. So yes, I think it's adapted to the aim of the taxonomy, but of course, once again, you have to be careful in the implementation and consider that more stringent criteria should be put on the energy efficiency. What I like in the taxonomy is that it's not, carbon mitigation is not the only criteria. And so this is interesting because it is also the concern of the people, as finally they are the main investors in their project. And I mentioned that they are not, you know, focusing on energy efficiency. It's something very, you know, theoretical, and whereas other criteria put into consideration in the taxonomy are, you know, tangible, such as, you know, avoiding impact of climate change, and circular economy and so on.
And one final question. It's about the relationship between minimum energy performance standards and one-stop shops. So the question is, would the development of minimum energy performance standards help the rollout of one-stop shops, assuming that minimum energy performance standards would add mid or long-term visibility on decarbonization journey for the existing building stock?
My answer would be yes, definitely. Since one-stop shops are focusing on housing, which is, you know, a very, well, a market where there are very, very small players, and where the demand cannot be asked to lead the way because they are one-off customers, generally speaking. I really think that the one-stop shop should play a role in you know, making the offer sector aware and take advantage of this shift towards energy renovation. So you know, increasing the level of regulatory levels cannot be applied on the ground if you don't have facilitators, and this should be the role of one-stop shops.
Okay, thank you. So then I would like, we have still a couple of minutes left, and I would like to, all of you, all panelists, please to switch on the camera again and to show up again for a final discussion. There are still two open questions from the audience, which I would like to work with. Adrien and Christophe, there's one question, which is, you insist on the importance of the regulatory framework. What do you have in mind? Can you say some words about that?
Well, actually, a number of things, but as we emphasize in the papers, the importance also to go and carry on market activity and to push for a number of activities that are not provided at the moment by market actor, and we also push for supporting these activities, and at some point it can create a difficulty with regards to competition rules and stated rules. So this is one of the points that should be debated and addressed. And then maybe not so specific to these integrated home innovation services, but there are a number of regulatory and legal difficulties that should be considered in the construction sector, even though not fully specific to integrated home innovation services. When we look at the possibility to offer finance, we also emphasize the fact that this is a highly regulated activity. And so if you want to propose in your package of services a financial offer, then the framework should allow for that. This is the case in France, but probably not in other EU member states.
Maybe to complement on that, I think what we're trying to do is basically we need to change the framework in which home renovation services are being offered. And that's the role of public authorities, and that role can be played in many ways. And depending on the country, you already have usually a number of instruments that can be used, either legal ways or typically, public legal status for operating commercial services that might be adapted, that might not be, that might need to be evolved. And so this is where we think there's a lot of things to be done, because it's when you start getting into the details that you find the devil. And so, yeah, looking at it from, France has done this for a while, and thanks in particular to Françoise on that. And this journey has been very much bumping into every obstacle that you can imagine. And so when we talk about 4 to 6 years for this kind of services to become mature, that's not even including the trailblazing, the pioneers that are bumping into these obstacles. So it's that's where we think a lot can be done by the public sector.
And when we say, just to add, and when we say 4 to 6 years to reach maturity, is to operate at scale, to be in place, to have the services in place and processes running. That doesn't mean self-sustainability. So for the experiences that we've seen, even if they are mature and now operate normally, they are not self-sustainable. So the economic viability is even a longer objective.
If I may add something, implementing the warning path would be a great thing to favor the one-stop shops. It could be a key tool for them.
But that brings me to the question. So given the rather long time to develop such services and to bring them on the market, and given the ambitious targets we have, and knowing how much buildings need to be refurbished in order to achieve the targets. So and given the fact that the Buildings Directive as one of the potential vehicles to support such services will be revised in this year. So which changes would you like to see? What would you propose to European policymakers to strengthen the framework to support these kind of services, independent whether it's a one-stop shop or an integrated service, or more informative services like the voting pass? So what would be your core suggestions to the policy sector in this regard?
Well, maybe just to say, the way that we see it is, that we have an emergency in starting to renovate the building stock. We won't be able to renovate at scale if we don't implement one way or another this type of home renovation services. It's not the only thing you need to do, but we'll need to do it. And the EU is pushing for this now. I mean, the Renovation Wave initiative is part of the Green Deal. There's a clear push for that. Whether that requires legal, I mean, whether that has to be put in stone in a directive is yet another question. There could be pros and cons for that. So I won't take a position on that, but really, you know, when things become an obligation, you see a lot of the incentive is to bypass, whereas incentives to, you know, showing this is something that works and this is what we are doing right now and in a lot of different forums. And for example, next week we have the Covenant of Mayors Investment Forum, where we're going to be showcasing also pretty much a lot of these projects. And also we're going to be presenting this paper in a different format. So we're trying to do this. Whether that needs to become a legal obligation can be debated, but I don't have a clear position. I don't know, Christophe and Françoise, how you would...
I mean, there's also a matter of political priority and use of public support. We have a huge amounts of public support now coming for home renovation, and one of our points is to dedicate part of these subsidies to support schemes and to intelligence and to integrated home renovation services, and not only to specific measures and support to investment. We've seen in the previous session a very interesting presentation from Positive Money Europe with the idea of a monetary approach to renovation of buildings. So there could be a huge amount of money available very soon, but there should be support to help disburse this money. Otherwise, we will just end up with a number of higher prices or poor workmanship.
Judith, Françoise, do you have an opinion or a proposal to the policy sector in this regard?
Yes, I hope that if a building renovation passport, for example, as a facility model has to be implemented by each country, that each country has their own room for implementation, because we really experience that the context in which you develop such a thing that is very important, and that you give each country flexibility, and because otherwise it could be very expensive.
Yeah,
that's my opinion.
As far as I'm concerned, I fully agree with the position of Christophe and Adrien. I think that actually it's better to spend efforts on support than on increasing obligations, including, I mean, towards the EU member states. So I mentioned in my presentation this difficulty regarding, you know, assessing what should be the one-stop shop in the frame of state aid and so on. This is always a complicated subject, frightening a lot of people and preventing regions, at least I see that in France, to use eceee funds on this, because they are afraid of not being, you know, consistent with this rule. So this is a concrete example where, in fact, support is needed.
Mm. Okay, so when I think about the buildings directive, for instance, I do not automatically think about obliging member states to offer or to develop such services, but to shape to improve the framework conditions for such services. So if you would have higher CO2 prices, for instance, which would make these kind of deep retrofits, which we need, more profitable, more economically viable, that could, for instance, help also such services. I'm not an expert in developing such services. Are there any barriers that need to be addressed? So beyond the economics, so what can be done, or how can member states and how can the European policy sector also increase the demand for such kind of services?
Yeah,
Do you have any
I mean,
idea?
one of the point and underlying ideas behind this approach is that maybe it's not only a matter of profitability of the investment or interest for the homeowner. Maybe it's just too complicated. Maybe they just don't know how to deal with it, and that's why nothing is happening. Even though, in a number of cases, you have interesting situation, attractive investments that are just not being done because there's no. It's just too complicated, and we've seen also in the previous session that. For the people that are wealthiest, that do have the money to refurbish, is actually the taxes and obligation are not so effective actually, because it's not strong enough for them to pass to the action, and it's still equally complicated. So it just doesn't happen.
Yeah, and I think, you know, if we look at the Green Deal, there is massive amounts of public money that are going to be poured into home renovation. I mean, the European structural and investment funds have a very strong objective, and you know, we've been saying for many years that more of that should be going into loans and financial instruments, because that's a better way to spend public money. However, there's even more money coming, and so there's going to be a lot of public grants, and there's going to be a lot of very cheap money to borrow. So the major risk right now is that this money is not spent, because that's what we have seen in the past 2 programming period. A lot of the money was not spent because the demand's not there, for many reasons, which, you know, it takes a long time. But the fact is, the demand, it's not so much the availability of money that is the issue, it's the demand. So, and then in the demand is the capacity of people to use that money, because they just have no clue how to access it, but also they just don't want to be bothered. I mean, I'm just buying a house. Home renovation is just a pain to most people. That's the reality.
Okay. Additional views on that?
Well, I mean, Adrian just put the finger on the key thing, and this is why, well, all the considerations about the business model of one-stop shop is about this. I mean, it's a pain, and someone has to take charge of this pain, and this is because it is fulfilling the need not of the people themselves, but rather the collectivity. And so this is why I really think that full consideration about the status of this activity as a service of public interest is really key, because otherwise I think that we miss the point. We think that we have to make it attractive to the customers, whereas it is rather the thing is to make them trust that if it is made in a way consistent with the objectives of the collectivity, they can rely on people who are paid by the government or paid by whatever public scheme to do it properly, and not bother them with it.
Yeah, so still a long way to go.
Well, it depends.
Yeah. Yeah. So we more or less come to an end, and one question, Carol. So Carol is our technical support. Carol, do I need to make any announcement for any further sessions? Is there anything which I need to take into account? I know there's one informal session at 4:15, which I would like you to, would like to urge you to join. And then there is, so there's only one informal session. And then there's this other wine drinking meeting also at 4:15. Meet and chat with other participants of the conference. So Thanks to all of you. I learned really a lot through reading your papers and through commenting your papers and through listening to your presentations. Thanks for the discussion. Very excited issue, but as I said, still a long way to go. Thanks to all the participants out there. And there are many ways of interacting with our panelists and with our panel leaders. So use them, please. And then have a nice evening, have a nice afternoon. And panel 7 continues tomorrow at, that's a good question. Panel 7 continues tomorrow at 12:30 with the 5th slot. So goodbye to all of you and hopefully see you tomorrow. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Goodbye. Bye.